There was a time when you could put one coin in your pocket, just one, and feel quietly prepared for the day. Not rich, not extravagant, just ready. That small seven-sided piece wasn't really about money at all. It was confidence. It was choice. It was the feeling that whatever the day gently asked of you, you could probably manage it. Today, coins slip through our hands, almost unnoticed. We tap, we swipe, we rarely pause. Back then, you did pause. Most people remember 50p, but they've forgotten what it really meant. You could hear it before you saw it. That soft clink against other change, the faint weight pulling at a coat pocket, the familiar circle it left on a kitchen table at night. It lived in purses' pockets, jars by the door. It was counted, turned over, thought about. Spending it wasn't automatic. You asked yourself if now was the right moment, or if tomorrow might need it more. That's because 50p represented trust. Trust that prices would still make sense. Trust that the corner shop would be there tomorrow. Trust that the day ahead wouldn't suddenly shift beneath your feet. Here on Past Britannia, we love remembering the small things that quietly shaped everyday life. If moments like this still mean something to you, do subscribe, and give the video a like so it finds others who remember too. Because the real power of 50p wasn't what it bought. It was how it taught us to think. Britain in the 1970s wasn't experienced through headlines or breaking news. It was lived through streets, shops, and routines so familiar they barely needed thinking about. The day had a shape, the week had a rhythm. Errands were planned, not squeezed in. Pay packets arrived, were opened carefully, and divided with purpose, because every pound and every coin already had a job waiting for it. Within that rhythm, 50p mattered. It wasn't loose change in the modern sense, and it certainly wasn't spare. It was meaningful without being extravagant. You felt it when it was in your pocket, and you noticed immediately when it was gone. It might cover a small errand, a simple treat, or a practical need, but once spent, it was truly spent. People knew prices by heart back then. Not roughly, not approximately, but exactly. You didn't need to check a shelf twice or scan a screen. Change was counted, passed back, and slipped away with intention. There was no sense of rounding up or forgetting the odd coins. Spending carried a quiet awareness, because money represented time, effort, and restraint. That awareness shaped daily life. Shopping wasn't rushed. Choices were fewer, but certainty was greater. You trusted that tomorrow would look much like today. Life felt slower, but somehow fuller, because nothing was taken for granted. Even small purchases carried a sense of completion, a feeling that things were balanced, at least for now. Those moments will feel familiar when you hear them, because they were shared by millions. They happened without fuss, without ceremony, and without anyone thinking they'd ever be remembered. Yet they quietly shaped habits, patience, and expectations. To understand the power of that coin, we need to step into those moments themselves, and see where 50p truly sat in everyday life, before the story moves forward into something more specific next. 50p showed its real strength in the smallest places. In local shops where the counter was worn smooth, where you waited your turn, and where the bell on the door marked your arrival. You placed the coin down, heard its clear sound, and paused. That pause mattered. You didn't rush, you considered. You asked yourself if this was the right choice or if it could wait. There was a quiet calculation before buying. Not written down, not spoken aloud, but felt. If you spent this now, what would you have left later? The question wasn't stressful. It was ordinary. And when the exchange was done, there was a small satisfaction in knowing you still had something in your pocket just in case. Coins rested on counters beside folded notes. Paper bags were handed over carefully, never overfilled, never wasted. Eyes met, words were exchanged. Thank you meant something because it ended a moment that had been shared, however briefly. These weren't transactions designed for speed. They were human, and they were trusted. Today, many of us guess prices. We glance, we scan, we hope. Back then, value was known. You felt it before you spent, and you felt it after. Trust lived in those spaces. Trust that the price was fair. Trust that your money would stretch as expected. Confusion was rare because nothing moved too quickly. Children learned this early. They watched change being counted. They understood that coins weren't endless. A single 50p could teach patience, waiting, and choosing. Adults did the same, often without realizing. Weeks were shaped around small sums, with quiet confidence that careful planning would be enough. Looking back, it's easy to think this was about thrift alone. It wasn't. It was about awareness, about knowing where you stood and what you could rely on. And while these everyday moments mattered everywhere, there were certain places where 50p carried even greater weight. And certain situations people rarely talk about, where that small coin quietly meant far more than its face value suggested. Those habits built a shared understanding. You didn't need signs or explanations. Everyone played by the same rules, and that created a calm you can still feel when you remember it. No one felt rushed out of the door. No one felt pushed to spend more, and because of that, certain moments stood out more sharply. Moments when 50p wasn't just useful, but quietly powerful, waiting for us in places we're about to visit. These are the moments that linger, shaping memory long after the coins themselves disappeared, leading us gently toward the deeper stories that follow next, and reminding us why such ordinary details still matter today to many people. 50 pence wasn't about showing off. It worked as a quiet kind of social currency, not status but participation. It allowed you to take part, to stand at the counter, to make a choice, without ever feeling excessive or indulgent. You didn't need more than that to belong in everyday life. That small coin gave independence without encouraging excess. You could step out on your own, handle simple errands, make decisions, and feel capable. Nothing was rushed. There was no pressure to upgrade, replace, or chase something newer. You weren't reminded daily of what you lacked, because what you had was usually enough. This created a quieter social truth. People moved at a human pace. You waited your turn. You finished what you had before wanting more. Falling behind wasn't a common fear because everyone around you was moving to the same steady rhythm. Comparison existed, of course, but it didn't dominate the day. Spending wasn't entertainment, it was purposeful. You bought what you needed or what you had planned for, and that was satisfying in itself. Restraint wasn't seen as deprivation. It was normal, and with that restraint came a deeper appreciation. When you did choose to spend 5 OP, it felt considered, almost earned. Today, abundance surrounds us. Choice is endless, and speed is expected. We move faster, but often feel less present. Prices blur together. Purchases are forgotten as quickly as they're made. Convenience has brought ease, but it has also taken something subtle with it, something harder to name. Back then, presence mattered. You noticed the exchange. You remembered what you'd spent and why. That awareness stayed with you, shaping habits long after the moment passed. It's not about wishing time stood still. It's about understanding what that slower pace quietly gave us. It showed up in places we rarely mention now, in ordinary moments that felt too small to record. Standing in line, waiting patiently, knowing exactly what you could afford. There was comfort in those limits. They removed anxiety rather than creating it. You didn't scroll or compare. You chose, paid, and carried on with your day, lighter in mind as well as pocket. That feeling stayed with people, shaping expectations without ever being discussed. It was shared, understood, and quietly reassuring, like an agreement everyone followed without needing to explain it. And because of that, small coins carried weight far beyond their size, anchoring daily life in ways we only recognize when they're gone, and quietly shaping how people measured enough. As we move forward, it's worth asking, gently and without judgment, what we traded for convenience, and whether some of those small, steady values might still be worth remembering as the story continues. People don't really miss the prices. Not in the way we sometimes pretend. What they miss is the feeling that surrounded them. The sense that life was manageable, understandable, and quietly balanced. Simplicity didn't mean emptiness, it meant clarity. Fewer choices, yes, but clearer ones, and that made the days feel grounded rather than restricted. In that sense, 5 OP became a symbol of balance, enough without excess. It represented knowing where you stood. You didn't feel constantly pulled in different directions, or reminded of everything you didn't have. What you had was usually sufficient, and that carried a deep, calming reassurance through everyday life. Life didn't shout at you back then, it spoke at a human volume. You noticed the day as it happened, because it wasn't racing ahead of you. Small moments stayed with you. A short errand, a familiar exchange, the quiet satisfaction of having planned well. These weren't grand memories, but they were steady ones, and they built a sense of contentment people still recognize instantly when they think back. None of this is about wishing time would reverse. Time moves on, as it always does. Each generation gains something and leaves something behind. But it's natural to miss the feeling of steadiness, of being present without effort, of trusting that the pace of life wouldn't suddenly overwhelm you. Those emotions linger because they were shared. Millions lived this way without ever naming it. And when we talk about a single coin, we're really talking about a mindset, one that valued enough over more, and calm over constant motion as we come to the end. The question isn't whether the past was better, but what we might recognize when we quietly compare it to the world we live in now, and perhaps carry something gentle forward today. Looking back, the contrast feels quiet rather than dramatic. Today we've gained convenience and choice beyond anything the 70s could have imagined. We can buy almost anything, almost anywhere, almost instantly. Life moves faster, smoother, and in many ways easier. That's real, and it matters. But something was lost along the way. Certainty, trust and value. The simple knowledge of what money meant and what it could reasonably do for you. Back then, 5 OP wasn't powerful because it was large. It was powerful because it meant something. It had weight, not in metal but in understanding. You knew what that coin represented before you spent it, and you felt the result afterwards. It anchored the day. It reassured you that things were in balance, at least for now. That feeling is harder to find today, even with far more at our fingertips. None of this is about choosing one era over another. It's about noticing the differences, and deciding what still deserves a place in modern life. So I'll leave you with a simple question. Do you remember what 5 OP meant to you? Share this with someone who lived through it. They'll remember. Thank you for being here today.